For years, Americans feared serial killers who taunted police, who left signatures, who craved attention. But the deadliest serial killer in American history did none of that. He didn't send letters. He didn't brag. He didn't demand recognition. He walked through cities completely unnoticed. And while the country was busy looking for monsters, he just kept killing. His name was Samuel Little. And the most terrifying part of his story is this: he was arrested again and again. And still, no one realized who he really was. Samuel Little was born in 1940 in rural Georgia into a life that was already broken. His childhood was defined by neglect, instability, and absence. There was no one watching him closely, no one guiding him, no one keeping records that followed him long enough to actually matter. By the time he was a teenager, Little was already drifting between juvenile facilities, reform schools, and temporary homes. He learned a powerful lesson early on. If you never stay in one place for long, you never truly get noticed. And that lesson would go on to shape everything. As an adult, Samuel Little became a professional drifter. He moved constantly from state to state, from city to city. California, Texas, Florida, Mississippi, Ohio. He slept in shelters, cheap motels, and abandoned buildings. He worked odd jobs here and there, and sometimes he just disappeared completely. Because he lived this way, no single police department ever saw the full picture of who he was. Each city only saw fragments. Each arrest looked like a minor offense. Each release seemed harmless. There was no one to connect the dots. But Samuel Little didn't choose his victims randomly. He chose women who lived at the very edges of society. Women who struggled with homelessness, who battled addiction, who lacked strong family support, and who, like him, moved often. Because of this, many were never even reported missing. When their bodies were eventually found, authorities often assumed the cause of death was an accident, an overdose, or natural causes. Files were closed, cases were forgotten, and Samuel Little just moved on to the next town. What makes this so chilling isn't just what he did, but what the system allowed him to do. By the 1970s and 80s, Samuel Little had already been arrested dozens of times for assault, violence, and other disturbing behavior. But each time, the outcome was the same. His sentences were short, the charges were downgraded, and his records stayed local. There was no national system to flag him as a recurring violent offender. No long-term monitoring followed him after his release. He learned something terrifyingly simple. If the victims don't matter to society, then the killer doesn't either. And so he continued, quietly and patiently, for decades. By the time America entered the 1990s, Samuel Little had likely killed dozens of people. Yet he blended seamlessly into the background of everyday life. He sat in courtrooms, he shared jail cells with other inmates, and he stood before judges. And each time, he was released. Not because he was ever proven innocent, but because no one could have possibly imagined the truth of who he really was. He was a time bomb that no one heard ticking. Then, in 2012, everything changed. Samuel Little was arrested in California on unrelated charges. By then, he was an old man, physically unimposing and easy to dismiss. He looked like just another aging criminal nearing the end of his life. But while he was in custody, something completely unexpected happened. Samuel Little started talking, not angrily, not emotionally, but calmly. He confessed to a murder, then another, then dozens more. At first, investigators didn't believe him. It just seemed too unbelievable to be true. That's when Samuel Little asked for paper. He began to draw, not maps or symbols, but faces. Women's faces. He drew detailed portraits completely from memory, capturing their hairstyles, their expressions, even the clothes they were wearing. Detectives were absolutely stunned. Then, families of missing women began recognizing the drawings. In some cases, relatives were able to identify the victims even before police could officially match the cases. That's when the room went quiet. This wasn't a fantasy. This was memory. Detectives began reopening cold cases all across the country. And one by one, the pieces started to fit. The locations he described matched where bodies were found. The timelines aligned perfectly with his travels. The specific details he gave checked out. The number of confirmed victims kept climbing. 20, 21, 22, 23. Eventually, authorities were able to confirm that he was responsible for at least 60 murders. Many investigators believe the real number is over 90. This made Samuel Little the deadliest serial killer in American history, not because he was brilliant, but because he was completely ignored. Samuel Little was convicted of multiple murders and sentenced to spend the rest of his life in prison. There was no dramatic courtroom confession, no apology, and absolutely no remorse. He showed no emotion at all. In 2020, Samuel Little died in custody, quietly, just like he had lived his entire life. The story of Samuel Little isn't just about a killer. It's about whose lives are protected, whose deaths are investigated, and whose disappearances go completely unnoticed. The fear doesn't just come from what he did. It comes from the realization that he didn't hide from the system. He lived right inside it, and for decades, nobody noticed. It makes you wonder, how many cases today still look isolated, simply because no one has connected them yet? And how many killers are walking free right now because their victims have been forgotten? Leave your thoughts in the comments, and follow Crazy Crime Diary for more true crime stories that reveal what society often misses. Thank you for watching.